I say then, they did not stumble so as to fall, did they? May it never be. Paul is systematically unraveling every argument against his teaching from the Jewish teachers. Their primary objection, and let's remember that these Jews have been following the prescribed law for hundreds of years, according to the Abrahamic law. So it can be excused for them being so tenacious in their attempt to stop it. Paul's message is that God accepts us as righteous in his eyes through grace alone. Not because of our goodness. And not because of the goodness generated from following the Jewish religious practices or law. This is the central message of the gospel. And remember, gospel just means good news. The good news is, the gospel is, it's not on us to do anything to earn our way. But it has been granted to us, and in no way earned, to come before the throne of glory. As sons and daughters, as sisters and brothers, unconditionally and boldly. The Pharisees and Sadducees at the time believed that before anybody could become righteous, they must be circumcised, as per the covenant with Abraham, and they must obey the Jewish laws. Paul argued against this at the Great Council in Acts 16. In that council, James, the head Jerusalem elder, and Peter, the lead apostle, agreed with Paul that believers are saved by a free gift of grace received through faith. And they commissioned Paul to take his message of grace to the world. The Sadducees and the Pharisees do not want this to go forward because they didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. So they're falling on their Abrahamic law, they're falling on their Pharisee law, and they're trying to dissuade Paul from preaching this. There's a couple of paraphrases of the statements made by them, mischaracterizing Paul's teaching. And Paul answers with the statement that we looked at earlier, may it never be. To every one of these statements that the Jewish leaders made, Paul answered, may it never be. If people are really made righteous by God's grace through faith, as he's teaching, then God would break his promise to Abraham by not accepting unbelieving Jews. May it never be. If by sinning we demonstrate the love of God, and if it is really true that the more sin God's grace covers, the greater God is shown to be, then God is unfair to judge us for something that makes it look good. May it never be. If faith is what really matters, then the law of God no longer applies. May it never be. If God's grace really covers our sins, then we ought to sin as much as possible so God's grace can be demonstrated even more. Chapter 6, verse 1. Look it up. May it never be. If we are really under grace rather than under the law, then we should sin as much as we can. If we are really under grace and not law, then keeping the law would be sinful. If we are really saved by grace through faith and not by the law, then we are saved from the law, which means the law is a source of death and is therefore evil. If Gentiles can really be saved without the law and without circumcision, then God has been totally unjust to Israel because he cast them aside and broke his promises. May it never be. If God actually looks at the circumcision of the heart and not adherence to the religious laws which gave Israel, then God has rejected Israel because he has rejected circumcision. May it never be. To each of these assertions, he answers with, may it never be. But throughout these arguments, we will see that Paul continues to assert the theme verse that righteousness or justice comes by faith from start to end. Righteousness begins by receiving justification in God's sight through faith, just as Abraham believed. Righteousness continues in our life experience through humble obedience rather than prideful self-seeking.